We're joined by Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Regev, good morning. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I want to break down this conversation in two, if I may. One to talk about the current events and one to talk about the bigger picture. The current events first, and specifically those at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. You'll be aware of what the World Health Organization team has said of the visit to the hospital that they made for the first time yesterday, describing the hospital as a death zone. How do you respond to that statement?
Obviously, conditions in the hospital are very, very difficult, and that is because Hamas deliberately and in contravention of international law turned the hospital into a war zone. They established under the hospital their command and control, from which a network of tunnels went for mile after mile, kilometer after kilometer, to underground bunkers, rocket launching sites, other armories, other fortifications. There's a subterranean network of terror under Gaza City, where the center was, until very recently, the hospital, the Shifa hospital. So according to international law, they were using all the patients, the doctors, the medical staff, as a human shield for their war machine. We were as surgical as we could be, but unfortunately the hospital suffered greatly because of this decision by Hamas.
What proof are you offering at the moment of the existence of that nerve centre?
So at the moment, obviously we've been saying so when we pointed to some preliminary findings. The Americans, as you know, both the Pentagon and the White House have said the same independently of us. And I believe patients, even for the most skeptical journalist, we will have in the next day or two, as the war situation stabilizes, as the fighting comes under control, as our forces expose more, you will have conclusive evidence to what I say.
Right, but you're calling them preliminary findings so far, and I'm wondering if that is an acknowledgement that as yet you have not proved your case.
As yet, we have shown that there are weapons there, that there are explosives there, that we found dead hostages in the vicinity of the hospital. We found a command and control room on the -2 floor. But once again, we have to show, and we still will, it's just a matter of time, the connection between the tunnel network and the hospital.
Right.
But that's obviously a touch more difficult because you're talking about difficult fighting, and we're afraid our forces will face booby traps as we go underground. We'll do it slowly, we'll do it carefully. But as I say, patience, I'm sure it won't be too long, too far away where we allow international press to come and have a look at what we've discovered.
But they will do so with your control and guidance, clearly, won't they? They won't be freely able to go in and see for themselves what's happened.
Correct, but they will be free to report what they see.
What of the situation facing those left in that hospital just now? If it's described as a death zone by the World Health Organization, they are presumably referring to the fact that they have found bodies outside the front of the hospital, that they have found patients who are still terrified inside, and staff likewise. You say that's down to what Hamas has done. Clearly, you are more than aware that a lot of people watching this from outside are saying this is down to what the Israelis have done.
So we were forced to take this action, and there was fighting outside the hospital. As far as I know, and I've been briefed by the IDF extensively, there was no actual combat inside the hospital. I'm not aware of a single combat fatality inside the hospital, which is a good thing. I'm not saying the situation is a good situation in the hospital, but there wasn't fighting inside the hospital that led to deaths. We have been saying before even we entered the hospital, we bought humanitarian assistance for the hospital, including fuel for the generators for the incubators for the babies, and we were helping from the very beginning, and today as well, helping people who wanted to leave the hospital. That's the best thing.
To go where?
We were calling on people to go a humanitarian corridor, which we've established, to go south, to get out of the line of fire.
To go south to Khan Yunis, which has recently been hit by an Israeli attack, we're told.
So we have to be more specific here. You are correct that up until now, we told people to go south in the general direction of the south. We wanted people out of harm's way. We didn't want to see civilians caught up in the crossfire between Israel and Hamas. Now that we are moving also against Hamas targets in the south, we're being more specific and we're asking people to move west of Khan Yunis, which is a designated safe zone. There are no Hamas military installations there, and therefore we don't expect fighting there. Now, we know it's difficult to move. My own father was a refugee. I can tell you, I know what it's like to be uprooted and forced to leave a home. It's been part of my family's experience. But it's surely better to move than to be caught up in fighting.
Well, just to go back to that point, these are people who fled their homes in fear. They probably know their homes no longer exist. They've arrived further south. You ask them to move again. There is very little aid coming into the area where they are currently residing. These people are terrified, and they will look at the Israeli action and say it's down to you.
I think many of them, of course, they're not free to say what they think today, but when this is over, they'll be free to say what they think. Many of them would say this is all Hamas's fault for starting this war. They might not particularly like Israelis. I can understand that. There's a historical antipathy that I don't negate. But surely there are a huge percentage of Palestinians, quite possibly a majority of Gazans, who say, why did Hamas launch this law? Why did they attack the Israelis on October 7th? Did they not know the Israelis will respond? Now, people can't say that to interviewers today. I understand. Hamas rules an authoritarian regime. They're very brutal, not just towards Israelis, but towards their own people as well. And of course, people won't say that publicly, but I believe very strongly that when this is over, you will have no shortage of Gazans who will say that.
OK, well, we will find out come the time. How is any of this helping you get closer to a release of those hostages?
So we might be close now, though you're not there until you're there. But
might be close.
Our assumption, yes.
What does that mean?
Hamas is not going to release the hostages because they've suddenly become humanitarians. Far from it. Yes, the people. Of the 236 hostages that we know they have at the moment, there are still 32 children, of them babies, of them infants. These are not humanitarians. They're not going to release hostages suddenly because they've decided to become nice people. Yes, we're under no illusions about who we're facing.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that, but clearly at the moment you are taking the action you are taking, and one of the main aims that Mr. Netanyahu stated at the start of this was to destroy Hamas and get those hostages out. And we are no nearer seeing those hostages coming out now, apart from the tiny number that were released within a few days, than we were at the start of it.
So we might be closer, as there have been unconfirmed reports. We might be closer. Once again, we're not there yet, precisely because Hamas is under desperate pressure. Because we have said, as you know, that for a release of hostages, we're willing for a ceasefire. Now, Hamas is feeling every day, every hour, every minute, the blows of the IDF. If they want a temporary ceasefire, they have to release hostages. They know that. And that is possibly making the chance of a hostage release possible when it wasn't in the past.
But where's the evidence that they are feeling the pressure that you are describing?
The fact that our interlocutors tell us that they're seriously considering a release. Once again, we're not there yet. But there's no doubt. I know what I'm talking about. We've got this from our intelligence sources, from talking to our interlocutors. The ground intervention, the IDF's presence on Gaza, the fact that we've moved into the epicenter of their previous control of the northern Gaza Strip, that area under Gaza City. The fact that they've had to flee, they're under pressure, and that could expedite, we're not there yet, could expedite a release of hostages.
And you would acknowledge, presumably, using the phrase under pressure, that your Prime Minister is under intense pressure from his own people about the way he is handling this. Look at the scale of that march. Look at the people standing outside his house now saying he needs to go because he's not handling this in the way that they would like him to. And some of them are suggesting that people in jail in Israel, Palestinian people, should be released to enable their family members to get out. What do you say to them?
First of all, the families of the hostages are suffering terrible, terrible trauma. Yes, their loved ones are kidnapped in Gaza. Often the loved ones are their children, small children. You have to feel for them. Your heart goes out to them. But if one talks about the political level, yes, amongst the hostage families, you get a range of views. Some people say stop the war and release all the, do everything that Hamas wants. Others say exact opposite. They're against us bringing in humanitarian support to Gaza because they say not a single truck of medicine to Gaza until our people are released. So you hear different things from the hostage families. And of course, they've got the right to say what they want, and we must listen to them all. But we believe very strongly that the upgrading of the military pressure on Hamas is the way to expedite release of hostages.
Very grateful to you for coming on. Thank you very much, Mark Regev, spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.